my name's Selena. I'm just here emceeing in Winningstad here in glorious Portland, Oregon, from those of you who are out there on the internet. So one very important announcement. Tonight at 7 p.m., for those of you who haven't bothered to look inside of your little name badges, there's going to be a party over at Ground Control. Who here has been to Ground Control before? Who here has played Rampage? Yeah. See, it's like the perfect Sysadmin game. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, you'll get your chance. So 7 o'clock, if you head down there, it's actually walking distance. You could also take a bus or a train if you really want, but there'll be a group of people just kind of walking down there, I'm sure, from here or from the Paramount. And we'll also have spillover, in case it gets a bit crowded, over at the Someday Lounge, which is just right around the corner. So you should totally come out and have a good time with us. The talks today end at about 5:45. And the other talk, in case you came to the wrong room, is Puppet at Constant Contact, and that's going on over at the Newmark right now. So, oh, and there's coffee being served up on the 4th floor for the rest of the day, FYI. All right. So I need to introduce Martin. He is a security engineer in cloud services at VMware. He's based in the Silicon Valley area, but he does spend a fair amount of time in Sweden and Rio de Janeiro. Hard life, him. The Cloud Services Group operates CloudFoundry.com, which is a new platform as a service offering from VMware. He's blogged a fair amount, which I'm familiar with his work here, about behavior-driven infrastructure, which is pretty good stuff. And he recently posted, because I stalked all of the presenters on Twitter, he recently posted a one-liner for Russian roulette for sysadmins in Bash. So you can go look that up and try it out yourself if you want. So today he's going to talk about his work at Sun transforming SSH in a for loop into a Puppet-enabled infrastructure. Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, so when I got asked to do this presentation, I started out with something like this: lessons learned introducing Puppet in an existing large-scale corporate environment, but that is kind of boring. Let's see if this. So I decided to scratch that and actually do this, which is a talk about the work I did while I worked at Sun, coming to a new group, which was the old school sysadmins. I worked with a lot of Unix beards. Like, they would make, most beards here I've seen very pale in comparison. So, I should back away from that mic. Going to give you a bit of a background, who I am, what I did, what we did at Sun. And then I'm going to go into sort of where we started, how we transitioned, and where we ended up. I'm going to give you the pitfalls I ran into, and going to try to give you some good advice, and then summary and QA. So I worked 15 years at Sun. So until when Oracle took over, that's when I thought it was time to look for a new job. And it's actually thanks to Puppet that I got a new job. The guy who hired me sits right there. And I started with Puppet around 0.23, which is a long time ago. I don't even want to know how many years that is. And now I'm working on our platform as a service solution, doing infrastructure as a service for the platform as a service. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. So at Sun, I managed, the last job I had was managing all the external systems, or I should say almost, to be correct, which in the end were about 650 external systems running the big websites like www.suncom, Java Suncom, downloads, almost everything that ended in Suncom. And it consisted of bare metal systems, Solaris zones, Zen DOM-Us and DOM-Zeros. And we had stuff distributed across 3 data centers in the US. And it was a big pile of everything you can think of when it comes to Solaris. So we ran Solaris 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 open Solaris. And it was everything from custom built, people installing by hand, to a fair amount of automation by jump start and scripts, and from development to test to production systems, and both internet and intranet facing. So that's sort of where I came in. And it was the old-fashioned sysadmin. It was at best jumpstart with a profile to get the system to a known state, and then it was SSH in a for loop. And we had engineers with root access to the systems, which meant stuff could change at any time, and we would only know when things broke. So systems were slowly rotting away due to lack of maintenance, because the stuff that wasn't in the SSH in a for loop, that didn't happen. And we had less than 30 systems per sysadmin. I should say also, the SSH in a for loop was actually an interesting piece of script written in bash awk sed, sending reports back through emails. So it was a lot of duct tape, coat hangers, and gum holding everything together. And the path we were headed, they kept adding more servers, more services, more applications. They launched new products, and we need this new site. And we got more and more traffic. And at the same time, this was when Sun was sort of on the downward slope. So every 6 months, some people just disappeared. We were fewer and fewer sysadmins, which didn't make things easier. But thanks to Puppet, we actually ended up in the full automation heaven. We started, every system we installed was just the bare minimum jump start, which, if you're not familiar with Solaris terminology, it's kickstart, where we just set the host name, DNS, and network, just enough so the system could itself contact the Puppet master and configure itself. And all configuration was done through Puppet, which meant every system we put there we could just repeat it if we needed another one. We monitored everything through dashboard. And before dashboard existed, we had a custom application, but dashboard is so much better than anything you could put together yourself. And we kept all our source code in Mercurial. And we ended up with over 150 systems per system administrator, which is a decent figure. So, how did we get from the old school Unix admin to full automation heaven? And the thing that I think helped the most was we had buy-in from our managers. They actually said, it's okay to set aside time to go and work on this, because trying to do both daily maintenance and keeping things running while you're trying to develop all the Puppet profiles and bring everything into nice ordered rows, that's not going to work, because that's yeah, if you get interrupted all the time, it's just way too hard. And we had a stated goal. We wanted to get away from the panics that we all always had, that, oh, this system needs to be built now. So the long-term goal was to get into a fully automated setup for both new systems and existing systems. And we took, and we drew up a plan. So we split the work up in sort of manageable pieces, because just saying, oh, we want to be fully automated, how to get there, it's a lot of steps. So we split it up into manageable pieces and then did one step at a time. And the first thing we actually did was create a bunch of custom facts. We did site-specific stuff, so we had facts that, based on the IP of the system, determined where it resided. So we knew that, okay, we have 50 systems in this data center, and we have 200 over here. And since this was back in the day where the number of facts actually was quite low, we added facts for a lot of Solaris specific stuff, so we could list what's running on the system and just collect all the information the management guys wanted to have. So how much memory do you have, and how many Solaris zones are running on each of the systems. And we created all the Puppet modules as self-contained units. Oops. And we started small and simple, because when I started with Puppet, I had initially started just with scripts as well. But then I heard about this new cool thing called Puppet, so I decided to give it a try. And best way is to start small and simple. Do something like set the login banner on each system. It's, even on production systems, that change is not going to break something. So then we could roll out that change everywhere and make sure we could see that, it worked. We get the reports back. Then we could move on to the next piece, like doing NTP. We had a number of NTP servers, and we're consolidating that into just a few. So that's also sort of a single, easy, self-contained piece to do. And then we just kept writing new small modules for all the low-hanging fruit, like the bash profile. Since we had systems from Solaris 2.6 up to Open Solaris, they all were slightly different. So just getting sort of all the ducks in a row with bash profile being exactly the same on all the systems, and having all the tools you want on all systems made life so much easier. And also, when you write modules, you should make sure that you can override settings, because as we found out when we sort of deployed this, that with the new bash profile, there was some guy saying, hey, you blew away my special I needed on this system. And there's always a special. There's always some application that's out of the ordinary. So make sure you actually make it possible to override all the settings. And you should think about, when a module is ready for release, is it enough to just test it on your local desktop or test it on a few development systems? So you need to figure out how you're going to do your testing, because doing it on new systems is very easy, but when you're bringing 500 existing systems which you have no idea how they're installed and what's on there, it's kind of a risky thing to just let Puppet go and fix it. So when you do test on a new install, but also on the existing systems. Because if you test on existing systems which are on sort of in a known state, then Puppet will only go and change that tiny bit that needs to be fixed. But on a new install, it'll have to go through the whole sequence of fixing things. And then you'll see if you have your dependencies right. So when I started with Puppet, I didn't think much about dependencies. And from the beginning, it was kind of awkward because you're used to writing a script. You go from top to bottom, but that's not the way it works. You just specify stuff and you need to specify the relationship. So you really have to use dependencies and use the graph option to actually generate a graph, dependency graph, and then open it up in a graph viewer. And you can find all the orphans, all the things that just sit there and are totally independent of anything else, which mean they can happen at any time. So, which, yeah, it is known to cause problems. And you also need to think of a deployment strategy. We had development, test, and production systems. So we rolled our Puppet changes into sort of releases. And I would first do things on my own system, make sure it works. Then I'd bundle it up into a release, put that on our development systems, leave it running for a day to see that it didn't break anything. And depending on what things you have running, you could have cron jobs that actually run just once a day or once a week. So just firing off Puppet and you see that, oh, it changed this and things seems to be working. But you can actually have a cron job running in the middle of the night expecting this directory to have a specific UID, which will then break. So just because it works when you run it, doesn't mean it didn't break something. So once it had run in development, I'd roll up a new release, push it to our test servers, leave it there for another day. If things didn't break there either, then I'd go next step and roll it into production. And we actually ended up splitting our production environment in two. We did everything in odd and even rows. That was based out of the data center. So we had odd and even rows in the data center. And each application was split, having at least one system on the odd side and one on the even side. So you could just disconnect the whole odd side and things would still work. So then rolling out a Puppet change that could potentially take out the whole application didn't make sense. So we split it into odd. So I would first push it to the odd side and see that, yeah, it didn't kill the application. And once I got that confirmation, I could then do the even side. And now in hindsight, this is actually what I should have spent much, much, much more time on, the education. Because I was the lead engineer doing sort of all the Puppet configuration and doing all the new stuff. And I try to keep everybody informed and teach people what Puppet is, how it works, how it will change things. But if people aren't doing that on a day-to-day basis, they forget. And for instance, they didn't see the difference between a managed file and a managed entry in a file. So people got afraid to touch etc password because they say, oh, Puppet's going to change it. I'm telling no, it's only managing the root entry. So you can, whatever's not managed by Puppet in etc password, you're okay to touch. And they also blame Puppet for exactly everything. Yeah, even on systems where Puppet weren't installed, something broke and say, oh, I must be Puppet. So they say, oh, I got email saying, oh, Puppet broke this and this. And I log on and say, but I haven't even installed Puppet on this system yet. So doing this again, I'd spend much more time training people, both what Puppet is, how it works, and also get them to be able to do changes themselves. Because I ended up doing almost everything. They would come to me sort of filing tickets. Can you fix this? And yeah, it didn't scale very well. And being a security guy, I really love Puppet because before I worked that job, I actually worked at the Sun's internal security department, writing the security standard for Solaris. And there I had written a tool to check the compliance so we could give management nice reports on the security compliance. And with Puppet, yeah, I didn't actually have to do that anymore because I knew all systems were in compliance. So I ended up writing a bunch of Puppet modules which I gathered together for the security compliance. So when we had audits, it took me less than a day to do an audit that before took a couple of weeks. Because I could just say, yeah, I know all my systems are in compliance. And when we updated the security standard, it just required us updating the Puppet profile, testing it, making sure it didn't break stuff. And then within a matter of hours, we were in compliance with the new standard. And back when I worked at Sun IT, it was usually a 6 to 8 month project to get all the existing systems compliant. I'm still doing good on time. And another thing that we could use Puppet for, when we had a security issue, for instance, a new security vulnerability, we would sometimes write a fact to gather information about if that vulnerability actually existed on the system, which meant that we would just push that fact, wait a while, and then we could go into dashboard and see which systems are vulnerable. And also, when you set up Puppet, make sure you have an emergency plan, because one day you're going to push something that you realize, oh, this is going to break everything. Yeah, it happened to me. So after that, I actually created a panic button, which would disable Puppets everywhere, so I could go and fix things and then bring it back online. And having the old-fashioned SSH in a for loop to start-stop things is not a bad thing. We didn't use it daily, but every now and then you really need it. And now with the M Collective, there's actually even an easier way to do it. And I really recommend that you take a look at Jeff's log version script. And in case you don't know what it is, it ties together Puppet with Splunk and GitHub. So whenever there's a change in Puppet does a change, it also outputs information that Splunk parses, which when you click on that change, it takes you back to GitHub, so you can actually see the code change in the Puppet profile that caused the change on the system, along with who did it, which was very useful when there were more people than me changing things. Because suddenly, yeah, when something broke, you just opened up Splunk, clicked, see, oh, it was Mike. So it's his problem. And now for the advice. Start small and simple. First, just get Puppet installed on all the systems. Doesn't have to do anything, just get it there and leave it running. Even if you don't plan to use Puppet everywhere from the beginning, at least if you get it installed, if you have a security problem, then you can do the fact thing. You can gather information even if you're not managing the actual system. You can still collect information. Then add stuff, one service at a time. Take baby steps. Start with the small and easy. And if you, like me, are bringing a lot of existing systems into compliance, you will find a lot of discrepancies. You will find that, oh, these systems didn't have bash. So then you need to go back and actually write a Puppet module to go and install bash, so you have bash on all the systems. And we used Etsy, the message of the day, to display a Puppet banner, which actually told people logging on, saying this system is managed by Puppet. So you can't just go edit files and expect them to stay that way. And we classified systems with either as partly managed by Puppet or fully managed by Puppet. And partly, that was those systems which only had the security requirements. Because that, no matter what the system was, it had to fulfill the security standard. Or it was fully managed, which meant we managed everything. And also add headers to existing files saying this file is now managed by Puppet. Puppet does that for some, but if you're dropping in files, it's a good thing to actually make sure that people who open up the file see that, oh, if I change this file, it's going to change back. And we also created a command so people could list all the files on the system managed by Puppet. Especially when you have the fully managed by Puppet and partly managed by Puppet. It's hard for people to know, can I touch this file now? So if they could then just list the files managed by Puppet so they knew that, oh, it's okay to touch this file. And use dashboard and review it daily, because if you don't look at what's changing, you have no idea what's going on. You can have, like we had the engineers with root access, they would go and change stuff. And then you see, if you don't use dashboard and see that, oh, these files are changing, and don't figure out why, then it could be, it could be an engineer changing stuff, it could be a security intrusion. So you need to go and look, figure out why, go to the engineer, say, hey, stop messing with those files. You need to update Puppet and have it do it. And stick all your code in source control management. And then test and test again, because when you have existing systems, it is really messy. And we used what I call behavior-driven infrastructure testing, which meant how do you know that the thing you say Puppet should do is actually the thing that you want? And when I set this up, I didn't want to have Puppet test itself, because you want something separate. So I used Cucumber to build tests. So I could say, this system you should be able to log on, you should be able to send mail, you should be able to look up the DNS name. From the systems, you should be able to look up the DNS name. So you're describing the behavior you want this system to have. But it's up to Puppet to actually do the manipulation of the files, actually, where you say that, oh, resolve.com should be this. While in your behavior-driven test, you just say, I want to be able to look up DNS names. And that was a good tool for co-workers because they said, how do I know when the system is ready to be handed off to engineering so they can go install their applications? I started saying, well, just look at the Puppet log and see if everything is okay. But then there might be one failing thing within Puppet, and if you're not used to reading all the logs, it's not that easy. But this, using Cucumber, you just get a nice long line of green dots, and then it says, oh, things are okay. And then people could say, okay, now this box is ready for production use. So, some of the pitfalls. We were harmonizing the UID and GIDs on the systems because we used a feature in Solaris called auditing, which records sort of everything happening on the system. And it's recording the UID, not the username. So when, if I have UID 100 on one system and 300 on another, in the logs, it doesn't get recorded as Martin. It gets recorded as 100 and 300. And when you're trying to correlate what happened across a number of systems, and the UIDs doesn't match, it's a pain. So we started to harmonize that so everything would be the same on all systems. And then you run into the problem that, some of the engineers say, hey, my push script doesn't work anymore. We are pushing over SSH and dropping off files in this directory. And so they had a magic directory which was owned by this web push user, which now changed. We changed the web push user's UID and all the home directories and everything we knew about. But then if you have stuff that's not documented and it's out somewhere weird, then it'll break. So if you're going to harmonize UIDs and group IDs, you need to log on to each system and actually go look and see if there are files and directories owned by that user somewhere outside of their home directory where you expect things to be. And then, do things one step at a time. It's better to do one change and then wait for it to settle, do one change and then do another change, than to bundle everything up and do one big change. Because when something breaks, it's much easier to fix it when you know, oh, I just pushed this change and it broke. Then you directly know where to go and look. And when you bring existing system into compliance, I would always run with a NoOp Flag first to see what it's going to change. So you can go and fix things in your script that might be, or in your profiles that might be broken. But if you use exec or call your custom scripts, they may actually change stuff which will make Puppet not behave the way you would expect. So even if you run it in the NoOp flag and things look good, you run it and let it change stuff, still go back and review what it changed because it might not be what you expect. And also watch out for modification ping pong. And if you have cron jobs, they might go and mess with stuff. And you actually might have users who will mess with stuff. I found a system where one file, every half an hour, I would get notified that this file changed, this file changed. I was like, why is this happening all over? And after some digging, I actually found that someone added a cron job to replace that file because they didn't know about Puppet. So they just saw the file changing. So they added a cron job to every minute go replace that file controlled by Puppet. So again, review what's happening in dashboard, because if you don't, you could actually have someone going wild and setting up cron jobs to break your things, and you think you're in compliance, but you're actually not. And you can never test enough. If you are lucky enough to have a green field where you're building everything from scratch and you have Puppet from day one, this isn't much of a problem. But as soon as you have a lot of systems and start to modify, either bring a system into compliance or actually modifying existing Puppet modules, then you can never test enough. And make sure your test systems are a good representation of the end systems. If your production systems look the same as your dev and test systems, because otherwise you'll have nasty surprises. And make sure all the developer and engineers actually document stuff that the way they expect the system to be. Because if there are undocumented dependencies, like there being a magic directory owned by a certain UID, if you don't know about it, then Puppet won't know about it. So, to sum it up, start small, educate your sysadmins. So, teach everybody how to use Puppet and how it works, so people aren't afraid of changing stuff. And also inform the users of the system so they know what to expect and which files are being managed. Do stuff in small increments, and shit will happen if you're bringing existing systems into Puppet compliance. That's for granted. So plan for failure, and then it might be less unpleasant. So, questions about this? Yeah. Need to come up to the mic. We have people.
I don't know. Maybe I could just repeat what I say. I don't know if I can make it out there.
Yeah.
So the question is, for your Cucumber stuff, did you install that everywhere and run it pervasively, or was it more of like a spot check that you would run on some systems sometimes? Yeah, the
question was, how did I use Cucumber? Did I install it everywhere or just on some systems? I had one system which was the sort of where I tested from, and it ran Cucumber, and it would then connect, it would SSH onto the box, then execute commands and make sure it worked, and it would log onto the box, send an email, then go back to the originating box, waiting for the email to arrive. And that was really helpful. And yeah, even better is, I guess you might have seen the Cucumber Nagios module as well, which integrates Cucumber with Nagios, so you get Nagios alerts when things aren't in compliance.
You mentioned you wish you would have spent more time training people. How many people did you have in your group, and how much kind of training and education did you do at the beginning, and what do you think is probably a bit better?
So the question is, how much training did we do? In the beginning, it was only me doing sort of the research, and as I started to add stuff, I realized that I probably should inform people about what I'm doing, and I think I had at least 3 sessions where I sort of informed them and gave them a slideware of what Puppet is, but it's not enough, because like Luke said, going from the normal sysadmin to asynchronous mode, it's a big change, because people aren't used to, you want to run a script, see things change, and it's done. And that takes a while. And when I started, I think we were 11, 12, and at the end, 6. And I would spend much more time on education. Also because you can offload work to someone else. Yeah. More questions? Yeah.
You mentioned earlier on one of your slides about when you're creating modules, it's a good thing to build in overrides. Could you describe how you went about with these custom factors?
Yeah, so the question is about writing modules and make it possible to override. So, for instance, the first module I needed to actually fix was we replaced SSH, the known host file on certain users. And then you realize that there was one of the times when I saw this change ping pong, because we had to specify that only these keys are allowed. And then some user were trying to add that. So he started just overwriting, and then we ended up with a ping pong, and then I said, hey, we stop, please. And then he said, well, I need this key added to this system. So then I did the trick where you say the source is a number of files. It's if you have a host-specific file, you use that, and if you have a site-specific, take that, or otherwise take this default. So that's yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get past the barrier of the engineers wanting to go and just change things at will, them losing the ability to do that?
So the question was how we got past the barrier where engineers want to go and fix things themselves. Well, it kind of became a moot point, because when we told them that we're going to introduce Puppet, you will have to change. And when we introduced it, we did the message of the day, the bash profiles, and all the easy things. And once we got to the stuff which they wanted to mess with, it was sort of too late for them to say, hey, stop, we don't do it, because then we did it everywhere. And it was a couple of weeks where I think, people say, hey, this is not, why can't I edit this file? But I think they too saw all the good things you get, because they knew that whichever system I log on to, it's going to be the same as all the others, because they too suffered from, well, when you log on to these servers, you don't have bash, you only have bourne shell. Yeah?
You said you kept a list of what files were managed on each server. That sounds pretty cool. How did you harvest that list? How did you generate those lists?
So the question is how we kept the list of files managed by Puppet. We actually harvested the no, not the manifest, the actual, the catalog. And you can also we saved the changed file on each file system, on each system as well. So you can go into the file bucket. So it was, it's actually really simple. The only thing you can get into there is if you set up your kickstart or jumpstart to set up files which are exactly what they are supposed to be, then they actually don't get changed until you modify them. Yeah? We have maybe one more question? Yeah?
All right, well, thank you.
Contact information up there.
Yeah, and the slides are there.
Thank you. Cool. So we have until 4 o'clock until the next session. Over in Newmark, we have Beyond the Node, orchestration with Noah. Get it? Orchestration? Yeah. And it was an okay pun, all right? And then here at 4, we have Puppet at Stanford. There's also a Puppet Enterprise demo that's happening, I believe, up on the 4th floor. So, yeah, thank you.